Hi, I'm Coach MK, founder of the Fitness Protection Program. I'm a run coach, not a life coach. But we're never really talking about the running. Running is the tool. It's the conduit we use to examine the world we live in, as well as its impact on our own lives and the lives of the people around us. How we react to certain people and to certain stories tells us a lot about how we view ourselves. I'm committed to the thoughtful, intentional exploration of the importance of running so that no one discounts their own badassery, ever. Final note, this podcast is geared towards every runner who won't lose their home, livelihood, or health insurance if they show up to the corral with a hangover. Not that I'm encouraging you to do that, just saying. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Fitness Protection Podcast.
Let's do it.
Oh my God.
So
you look amazing when you're thinking really hard. I gotta say, I sat here for a good 3 minutes just watching you work, taking some screenshots. Big wide-eyed, doe-eyed Sarah with her gorgeous hair in front of the computer. I really like that top, by the way. I'm going to put some of these screenshots because now that I've talked about them, I have to, for the sake of journalistic integrity, like show your work face. It's amazing. And the shirt really is like flattering. There's something about this angle where the camera is that.
Oh yeah,
like,
for sure. The downward angle. My computer here doesn't have a webcam, so I took the big webcam with the tripod, and so that's why it doesn't look like I'm looking at you, but I am looking at you. But now I'm looking. It's like awkwardly next to my computer, but a little bit above. But yeah, the downward angle is. I think it's good for everybody.
There's an amazing clip on YouTube. It was when Kim Kardashian's book Selfish came out, and she tried to teach Jimmy Kimmel how to take a selfie. And her tips are amazing, and you have successfully incorporated all of them into the camera angle.
Without even knowing, this is even my good side.
Was that intentional, Sarah Axelrod? Dr. Lerman Axelrod of Harvard University.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Love
my
it.
brother and I both have the same nose, and we both have like a good side for our nose and a side where like our noses just look so, and it's our dad's nose. Like we both very much have our dad's nose, and people like to refer to it as the Lerman nose. It is rampant in our family, and whenever we each get photographed, like slightly from below on the nose side, it's like whoosh. So when I was trying to set up the camera before, I was like trying it over here, and I was like, nope, put it over here.
Oh my God, that's so funny. This is one of those things I've been meaning to do, but clearly don't care about because people still tune in anyway. I need to get a desktop tripod. I have one for downstairs that is perfectly sufficient when my kids are not around because it's also really light and they can displace it and knock it over really easily. It's actually like my phone is heavier than the tripod for downstairs, but it's too big to use effectively on my table because it's looking down at me at a not even like that angle is not weird for what you're doing right now, but it also doesn't have the feel that I'm going for, which is like you're just hanging out next to me at my desk. So I keep saying I need to get a new one, and then I just don't, or it doesn't ever come up. So at some point, maybe I'll have to be inspired. We'll see what you do at work. What are you going to do when we're doing these at home? Clearly, I'm going to have to up my game.
I'm going to have a smaller desk. Number one.
Oh, I've seen what you do at your desk. I've seen that. I saw that too on Sunday night. Your knee up to your chin.
That is my favorite position to sit in. I try really hard to sit with like 2 feet on the floor, but really I like a knee up by my chin. That's kind of my jam.
Oh my God. I totally love it. My favorite thing about filming these podcasts is Coach Sarah never quite remembers. I don't know if it's that you don't turn the sound on. Either way, so she's usually here first, not surprising, and then I join. And when I join, she has no idea because I'm so late.
Open.
She's doing something else.
Yeah.
All the tabs open. She's in a different tab. She's moving on to something else, and the sound is probably turned off, or she's listening to something else, so she can't hear me. Hello, Sarah. Sarah. Boy, you're thinking real hard. That's what my husband looks like when he poops. Are you pooping, Sarah? I mean, I have a whole dialogue going that amuses me. And I'm like, I wish I could hit the record button so she could hear the amazingness coming out of my mouth right now. But then it would ruin the moment because she would be aware of it.
It totally, but when you know you're being observed, it completely changes. That's why observational study is very difficult to pull off. Yeah.
Right? Because like just by agreeing to participate, like you would need to set it up like slap bad. You know it's happening and you just don't know when. And then somebody waits till your guard is down. But then that makes the study really hard to control for. So
I love it.
So like the Back to Sleep campaign, do you remember that?
No.
Back to Sleep. The series of studies that launched that, or that the scientific underpinning for that, happened, I want to say in the late 70s. I don't remember. But when I was a White House intern, I worked in the office of Tipper Gore. And if you remember, Tipper Gore got lambasted for censorship of all things.
She hated that Prince album.
Because
hated it.
In her defense, all right, I get protective of Mrs. Gore because they're from my hometown, and my mom and Tipper were friends and sorority sisters, and outsiders in a very small town that did not appreciate, like, Al Gore deciding to, initially, when he came back, coming and just said he was a homesteader, he's like, no, you're from D.C. Al Sr. is from Tennessee, but you only spent summers here. You know what I mean? Anyway, people were not necessarily nice to Tipper when she moved it. Like, people would delight in reporters kind of swarming around Carthage being like, do you have any memories of the Gores here? And they'd be like, let me tell you about the time Tipper came to church and breastfed. Really? You're going to reduce her to that? Like, come on. During the presidential campaign? Come on. But it's a story people love telling. And I don't want to get in trouble for saying it here. She didn't do anything wrong. It's just like she did this totally acceptable thing. Anyway, she found that she was not really accepted pretty much anywhere, which is unfortunate because she's a lovely person. But if you had met her mother-in-law, Mrs. Gore, the first Mrs. Gore was the first woman to graduate from, I think, Vanderbilt Law School. She was, like, that. When I talk about there was only one RBG per generation, her counterpart was Mrs. Gore. And Mrs. Gore, Al Sr.'s wife, she was a force to be reckoned with. Quite amazing. And very kept to herself, quiet and, like, humble to the end, but you did not mess with Mrs. Gore. So for Corinna's, I don't know, I want to say 7th or 8th birthday party, we were all really young. She'd wanted this Prince album, and parents didn't know.
This is Purple Rain, right?
This Purple Rain. How would they know? Because there's no, like, we didn't have MTV where we lived. Even the Gores couldn't get MTV.
No parental advisory.
Right? Like, there was no power.
Yeah.
Well, there was no power that could deliver cable TV to where we were because we're so rural.
Right.
It just didn't exist. So I firmly believe, like, you had to, like, opt into the channels that would have told you about music at that point, because if it wasn't getting radio play, you had to heard it. So if your 7-year-old has heard of it and wants it, it must be benign. It was a fairly safe assumption at the time. Even though we look back at things like An American Tale and you're like, that is not made for children. WTF. It's a very different, like... So for anything to have been surprising during that time, in and of itself is surprising. But at this birthday party, they give Corinna the record, and she wants to play it right away. And imagine being Tipper Gore in this room where your mother-in-law is sitting right there, this formidable woman.
And Darling Nikki comes blasting.
Darling
my
Nikki,
God.
The first song, masturbating in a hotel lobby with a magazine, and the look on her face. That was what led to. And she told this story publicly a couple of times before she stopped talking about it at all. But the backlash to wanting to put explicit lyrics so that no parent ever felt the way she did again in front of their mother-in-law became a thing. But I forgot. I'm sure I had a point telling that story. I don't remember what it was, but it is a really terrific story. But
let me think. Where were we? Because I did get really absorbed in the story because I actually knew one of your cultural references. I know that album. My husband made me listen to it. He was like,
the first song.
How have you not heard Purple Rain before? This was when we were, I guess, 22 years old or something. We lived in Italy, and he was like, all right, we're getting the movie. We're watching it. You got to learn some things. And I was like, okay. My parents did not have any Prince albums or anything like that. So we went to the library and we got Purple Rain on DVD and we watched it. And he was like, and this is the song that Tipper Gore really hated. And I was like, oh, I kind of get it.
Well, I would say with the context, it's not that she hated it. I can imagine being in that moment.
Oh,
you'd hate
totally.
that song too. I think most of us would, because I mean, there's mother-in-laws and then there's having Mrs. Gore as your mother-in-law.
I can.
Oh my God. Oh, and I remember, so this is where I was going with that. So that went so badly as she thought it was a totally benign platform that she could have to stand on. That could be her issue, protecting children. And it went so horribly wrong. The backlash was so intense, even from the Democrats, that they had to back away from it. It got done, but at a big cost. Anyway, so when I was working in her office as an intern, and yeah, there was probably totally nepotism there. Let's be honest. I don't lie about like why I got it, but it's like I had one shot. He happened to be in office like during that time. I am not like Huma Abedin, who probably for all intents and purposes, seemed to have had no connections. It was picked out of a pool and brought there. But that never getting in the door, like, let me tell you, in a place where nepotism is rampant and people know who the selected versus the we selected were, and it doesn't necessarily work in your favor. So yeah, they get the internship, but it's never going to work there. You're going to have to take it somewhere else after that. And it's known. So anyway, I could talk all day long about, like, you know, doors being opened and the value of that. But she was looking for something of her own. This would have been 1997, beginning in 1998, and looking for her own thing to her own purpose. If her husband was going to run in a couple years, she needed to have her own platform. Like, what was going to be her just say no that everyone could get behind? And Back to Sleep they tested it as though this was going to be it. And the Back to Sleep campaign was based on a couple of observational studies. They just went out and asked people, like, do you have all your children survived? Yes or no? Sudden infant death syndrome. What causes it? Well, we know that it's less likely to happen after all of these questions if babies sleep on their back. What they didn't really account for in the studies, though, and this is not a knock on Mrs. Gore or her office, like, this was a known weakness of the studies, was that it was self-reported. Right. So there's no way to control for it. And everyone knew even then that the right answer, instead of the true answer, was that of course my baby sleeps on their back.
Right.
You know, how many people are going to admit, like me, my babies were front sleepers, all except Violet, and we just went with it. It scared us at first, but not sleeping scared us more. In a second, they fell asleep on their tummy or on my tummy on their front. I'm like, well, why not in their crib as long as the crib is safe? So all of my kids have survived, and that's great. And SIDS is horrible and it's tragic and we don't know what causes it. But the scientific link in 1998 between SIDS and back sleeping is tenuous at best.
Well, and of course, like, you're not going to do, a double-blind study on back sleeping versus front sleeping because you can't make a baby sleep in a position they don't want to sleep in. Who's ever tried that and had success?
You can't make a
baby sleep, period.
Oh my God.
But then also, as when people know what the right answer is, especially when it comes to taking care of their babies, boy, like, there is, oh my God, I remember this really clearly, having a really young baby, the shame and sort of need to not say the wrong thing about how your kid sleeps, how you interact with your kids sleeping, let's put it that way, because I don't want to say the big term that makes everyone either go, yeah, or that's it's so fraught. It's so fraught. And I remember my really good friend Caitlin, who's in Rebuild, who has a son who is about 4 years older than Roz. She was like, listen, I know this seems like the most important thing right now, and everyone in your circle is obsessed with it. Like, no one's going to care when she's in kindergarten, whether you sleep trained her or not. No one's going to care. And it really helped me to hear that. It really, really helped me to hear that, because I could not see outside of that reality. Everything in my world was the sleep. It was just all about the sleep. So doing any sort of observational study and expecting that you're going to get actual answers that tell you things, you got to really, really listen to what you're saying and what people are saying and where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about, we were talking about you observing me from behind your, I'm in my panopticon here, but what about your
panopticon? Can we also separately start making a list of the SAT words you pepper into every conversation we have? Oh my God. I think the last one was milieu. I'm like, I've never actually heard that pronounced before, because who the fuck says that? Dr. Sarah Lerman Axelrod of Harvard University. Oh my God. Okay, so what word did you say it again?
Panopticon?
Can you spell it, please?
Okay, well, that's actually pretty easy to spell. It spells, it's about like it sounds, panopticon. Okay. There's a reason for that word. It is because in online learning environments, we talk about this thing called the panopticon effect, which is...
You can say here at Harvard, Sarah. I'm not going to let anyone beat up on you for saying, well, here at Harvard.
Well, the thing is that Harvard actually does not really have a whole lot of online learning. Online courses are a thing at lots of universities in the country, and Harvard is kind of trying to put its toe in that, but it's still learning about it and, whether it's actually effective or not and all these sorts of things. And one of the phenomena that you see in online learning is the panopticon effect, which is that you never know who's looking at what, when. You're the student, you don't know when the professor is looking at you, because if the professor is looking at a bunch of different things, the students are never exactly going to know what the professor is looking at. Conversely, the professor never exactly knows where the student's attention. So it's a totally different sort of relationship, spatial relationship and interpersonal relationship that you have because of the way online classes are structured, and they are structured differently in different places. They have different kind of setups.
It's like the FaceTime problem, right? You're talking to someone on FaceTime and they're looking at you, but they are not looking in the camera So it's not the same feel as though like, well, what are they doing? Because they're not looking at me. It's that tendency you have if you're talking to somebody and they're looking over your shoulder. They're like, what are you looking at? Yeah, it's something you have to get over.
And how does that change the behavior of students and their interaction with, the course? So that's like, these are sort of big questions, especially in language classes, and that, at the Language Center, that's a thing that we talk about a lot. I think they're planning on having a workshop about the panopticon effect, specifically in the fall. But it's, this whole thing where like, am I being looked at? Maybe I could be being looked at all times, but I don't really necessarily know. So, oh my God. But what I meant to say before you made me explain the panopticon is that I'm obsessed with your skin, and you've been talking about your new skincare regimen, and I want to hear about it before we talk about my tube of toothpaste.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. By the way, the Harvard thing, just before I respond, I'm super protective of you because I remember a long time ago in Japan where I first was learning about skincare, I was at a party and there was a guy that had just finished Harvard Law and was on like some sort of a summer trip before he went to start his full-time job. And there were two other women there that, not with him, but just all these people that I didn't know, but they clearly all knew each other from somewhere before. And he was saying like, yeah, went to Harvard. It's sort of the trump card, like in a bar, but I wouldn't say it's better than any law schools, but it's definitely better at getting pussy. And I was just sort of like, fuck. He's like, yeah, he's like the most useful thing it really has done in my life. Cause he's thinking he's humble, right? The most useful thing it's done is get women who don't know anything about Harvard into bed with me. People who know, like, probably wouldn't choose Harvard first. And these other two women also had gone to Harvard, and they were kind of like rolling their eyes and saying, yeah, unless you're a woman who went to Harvard, in which case you can't ever talk about it.
Pretty much.
And I remember that very well. Like, that's really interesting. Like, the paradox of being at Harvard is that you can't talk about Harvard without sounding like you're bragging.
But when you avoid talking about Harvard, people get all over your case for that.
It's worse.
We have sort of...
Yep, you got to perform it just right.
And there's sort of a joke, which is that everyone says like, oh yeah, I went to school in Cambridge, which if you're from Massachusetts, Cambridge is the town where Harvard is located, and everyone's sort of like, okay, right. And it's this weird code that feels like humble bragging, so people react really negatively to it. But it comes from a place of, I know if I say Harvard, everyone's going to think I'm being an asshole, so I'm just going to say Cambridge and hope that no one notices.
Well, like 2 years ago, I tried to introduce another book of the cycle.
I remember
called Big Potential by Sean Acor. And I love the first chapter of that book. And I remember saying clearly, like, if you do nothing else, read the introduction, and then you don't have to read any further. Everything you need to know from the book, you can glean from the introduction. And I don't like saying that to people, but I can get them to read like a 5-page introduction. Then I can talk about all the concepts in the book, whether they read it or not. So that's my idea of a book club.
It's the grad school book club.
And the response was so visceral, right? People were really angry. Like, all I did was talk about Harvard. And at the time he met Oprah. I'm like, let me tell y'all something. When I meet Oprah, you will hear about it until I die. And I mean it. Like, I will never stop talking about it. You can't make me. And the Harvard thing, like, he went there as an undergrad, got a fellowship, continued for graduate school through the PhD level, just like someone I care about very much, who shall remain nameless, that I'm looking at right now directly through the camera, but also started their career there. Similar to someone else I know, because it was, why not? They're drawing from their pool. So, but this is where he has been for the past 25 years of his life, but he can't say the word. That was interesting to me. The reaction, that was when I first started thinking, like, are you really reacting to him, to Harvard? Was he bragging? Or, I don't know, it was really interesting. If you said grad school, would you feel better about it? But I digress. So I now point it out and want to laugh at it, and hopefully we can laugh along with you, as you leave Harvard University, because you work at Harvard University, and you got your PhD from Harvard University, and you should be able to say, I went to Harvard University because I'm a badass and I'm amazing. The same way you should not have to explain to anybody why you ate the second scoop of ice cream that was given to you. I cried when I heard your mantra, by the way. I really did. I was just like, I wanted to give you a hug. I wanted to like beat everyone in that room with an ice cream scoop. Like, why would you look at her funny? Let her eat the damn ice cream.
I love ice cream.
So, it comes from a place of love, but you should be free to say Harvard here, just like you should be free to eat whatever the fuck you want.
I really appreciate that. And you've always, since I first, when we first started talking to each other, that was when I had just gotten my first job out of grad school, which was also at Harvard. I also taught at Harvard University. And I've always really appreciated the way you both like wanted to sort of celebrate that and encourage me to celebrate it too, in a way that very few people ever really did. And even in my own family and around my husband, I have to be kind of careful, because I think to my husband, marrying into my family was like, oh, all these people people either went to Harvard or taught at Harvard in some form or fashion. Like my mom, my stepmom, my dad. My brother got recruited to Harvard for rowing, but decided not to go because he also got recruited to Dartmouth and decided he wanted to go there instead. I mean, like, seriously, that is...
It's a big deal because the presumption is that legacy always gets in. When you're the legacy that doesn't, it's like you're the failure. You're the black sheep. There was a girl I went to Georgetown with. I didn't know her well. We were not friends, but she was pointed out to me multiple times. She's the fourth child of a family that made its fortune making a liquor that you've definitely consumed. Or if I said it, you would be like, oh yeah, like it's so common that the name of this alcohol, like you wouldn't say, this is not the example, but instead of saying like, oh, I'd like a Budweiser, you know, they're talking about beer. This alcohol, this hard liquor they created is so commonplace.
It's like saying, pass me a Kleenex when you really mean a tissue, but everyone says Kleenex.
Yes.
Kleenex.
Exactly. It's an ubiquitous brand name. Yeah. And she was the only one that did not get into the Ivy League school that everybody else had gone to. And it was a capital P problem. And she had, you know, I mean, there was fallout from it because that's how she was known. That's how she was introduced to me who didn't know her. Like, oh, that's who she is. Yeah, she didn't get into whatever, even though I had no idea there was a family. So there's good and bad that comes with legacy. Pressure is a privilege, but it can also be a bullshit stick that you could be beaten with. But yay, skincare, I think is what you asked. Sorry.
Well, you keep like sort of dropping these things in there about like, oh, my new skin thing, I'm so excited. And I keep being like, well, when are we going to talk about it? And then we keep getting off on tangents and then we don't talk about it. So I want you to at least tell us about it quickly before we talk about capital P pressure and, you know, coaching and running and stuff. But like, I need to know because God damn it, you look amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So I started, I wouldn't say paying attention. I was shamed into thinking about it quite effectively when I lived in Tokyo. At the time, I was a smoker. And I was still running, but I was smoking too. And if you'd asked me at the time, I would have been like, yeah, you know, running was a habit first, whatever. I can't get out of awkward conversations to go for a run. I can get out of anything because I need to have a cigarette. Like there's a social function that has never completely been replaced ever since I quit smoking. But I remember I just had a cigarette and I walk into a store in Tokyo with a friend of mine and we walk past a Helena Rubinstein counter and she can smell the cigarettes on me and is like, I know you're young, but you really need to start thinking about vitamin C. Vitamin C was relatively new on the market at the time. And when you would buy these little vials, it would have the powder form and the top, you would have to shake it together instantly because the powder would oxidize the second it hit. It would bind with oxygen. So you'd have to shake it good and completely. And by the time you took it off, you might see that you only got like a fraction of the powder out. So it was arguably useless, but she was like, you might quit at some point. And if you do, it'll be easier to stay in that quitting state if you don't look like a smoker. So think about that. And I'm like, well, okay, you just made a sale. And I bought like this expensive stuff and I put it on my face all the time. And I'm sure I did it incorrectly because I couldn't read the instructions. It was Helena Rubinstein, but I was in Japan, so the instructions were in Japanese. I kept up with this habit of putting that on before moisturizer and always wore sunscreen. Fast forward till we paid off our college loans in 2016. And one of the first things I wanted to reintroduce was a ritual of self-care that I had abandoned after I left Wall Street. And that was a monthly facial. Because money, it's an easy $150 a month to clap back when you need to. And that was one of the first things to go. And it was one of the first things to come back. I'm like, I'm doing this once a month, no matter what. Because we live in Denver and it is cheaper here. So I get dermaplaning done. She takes a scalpel and carefully takes off the top layer of dead skin and then nourishes and moisturizes. And it's just a wonderful hour of like a face and head massage that leaves me kind of glowing and feeling radiant, mainly because I've done nothing but relax for an hour.
My mom did facials
and I
when
will
she
pay
was
to
in
do
chemo,
that.
like all those years. She was religious about facials once a month. And that's exactly what she said, that it was just, I think it was an act of self-care that felt really significant to her. The fact that you were spending some money on it made it feel significant too. She brought me with her a couple times and it hurt so bad because I was like a teenager. So I was just full of zits and
she was extracting.
And I hated it. And I was like, Mom,
that hurts.
Cool. I'm glad you love this. I don't. but that was always her thing. And and now especially, you know, I get that. I can really see why, you know, that makes a huge difference to your demeanor and also to your skin. I am not getting facials and it shows.
No. And, I can't blame you. When I started doing the dermaplaning, so the facials that I used to get would be hours, it felt like, of taking all the acne out of my skin in a way that wouldn't leave pockmarks behind. And it was painful and terrible, but I stuck with it for 6 years, mainly because, I wasn't in a good place mentally. It kind of felt like the punishment I deserved. But I was always looking for the top half of my fraction, what's going to cancel out everything I'm doing to my body the rest of the time. So my current person talked me into a vitamin C serum after I finally noticed that I'm getting from maybe from some of the smoking, but also from the fact that I purse my lips when I'm thinking really hard. I've got these cracks now, and they've shown in a couple sets of family pictures. And I was like, ooh, I don't mind aging. I kind of love it. But this is really annoying because the lipstick bleeds out no matter what I do.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, I get why people do fillers now and why they get out of control. They're trying to prevent that very natural thing from happening. She's like, actually, you're pretty good to have gotten all the way to 41 without this being a thing. That's where lip fillers and face fillers come in. Anyway, just fun fact there. I had no idea. Not that I'm going that direction. Personally, I don't want that. I have the type of skin that would probably have a really bad reaction to it. But so I don't judge people for getting it. I'm like, oh, I completely understand now. Shoot, yeah. If your skin can tolerate it, go for it. But she talked me into this vitamin C serum, putting it all over my face and buying a moisturizer that went along with it, and showed me really carefully how to put it on. And it lasts forever. I've had this now for we're in month 8 of both the serum and the moisturizer, and I use it every day, sometimes twice now, and I really, really like it. So when we got the new roof on 2 weeks ago, as you could hear on the podcast, all and sundry, they put the satellite dish back on incorrectly, and we're on a wait list for DirecTV to come back and fix it. And I was still in not quite out of bed yet, couldn't sit up for very long. So I'm on my back, not really working. I've got all this time. What can I do? I've got no TV. I'm kind of done with Netflix, or not totally finished, but I'm I'm not really inspired. I got sucked down a rabbit hole of skincare on YouTube.
I've heard this is a whole thing. And Twitter too. Skincare Twitter, I hear, is major thing.
It's huge. And I've never paid any attention to it. It's not like I'm morally opposed to. I've just never been interested in anything that the really big influencers like PewDiePie, that they do. And so it's easy to be like, well, what do they do? Kind of poo-pooing them the same way you do a Kardashian, which I think is, pseudo-intellectual bollocks, as everyone knows. But I also never really, kind of like a lip filler, you don't get it till you get it. It's like, oh, I see the point now. Okay, not saying I want it, but I see why someone else might. And now I'm with it with skincare. I'm like, well, how do you know what serum to go with and when do you put it on? And hearing all of this broken down and explained so beautifully, like what the 10 steps are for, I'm like, well, I think I might want to get a couple more steps. So I bought everything that they recommended. It was a total of $70 maybe. And I've been using it. And it makes a real difference. If I had to limit it to one, though, be like, okay, I can't spend $70. MK, what would you buy? It comes down to the wash. So I have really oily skin and with dry patches here on my cheeks that usually turn red like they are right now. So sometimes it's called combination skin, but I don't have, it's not dry enough. Like the oily is oilier and the dry is not, it's not
so
enough
dry
of it
in Denver
to be
too.
classified as combo.
I mean, I'm sure you would need something completely different from me, even if I had really similar skin to you. Because when I spent 4 days in Colorado last year or 2 years ago, I was like, I need some lip balm right now. I cannot anymore for another minute without lip balm. And then the lip balm that I tried, it just, it hurt, it burned. I mean, it's so different from where I live and what I need because of the air that I breathe and that you breathe. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes all I need is the air out there that I breathe and some really good chapstick, or just to stay home. I had never taken the time or paid attention to learn how to wash my face because it seems like such a basic thing. Just run, just wash your face. But these two girls, they're chemists and they both worked for the same, I want to say L'Oreal, they worked for the same big beauty brand as chemists, and they're both really young. And they talk about pH and how it relates to your face and how if your skin feels tight, that's something marketers go for because that was been tested. Americans conflate that tight feeling with cleanliness, like you have stricted olive oil, and that's not what you want to go for. And I never heard this before because I thought the same thing. I have oily skin. It finally doesn't feel oily. It feels tight. That's good, right? Nope, wrong. That's what's causing blackheads. And they were like, you need this oil. First, you wash with an oil-based cleanser because that removes all of the excess sebum and all of the dirt through the day. And then the second wash, and it's very quick and with your fingertips, which I also thought you weren't supposed to do, but that's actually better for your skin. There are receptors in your brain, and they brought out the science and talked about it and had links. And they were like, there's science to it. Having even your own fingers on your face or another person's fingers on your face doesn't matter. It sends same signals to to your brain of pleasure and relaxation. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Because I'd always been taught not to touch my face because that causes acne. And they're like, you can touch your face but you need to obviously wash your hands first, but your hands are going to be really clean throughout this process after that first wash. So the second wash should be with a very super duper, because you're working on a cleanish slate, a foam-based, water-based cleanser that then takes off the oil that might have been missed or left behind. And it can't be too harsh because that will strip and over dry. You need something that's going to balance your pH. But it's so gentle that if you bought it on its own, you would think this is useless and it doesn't work. If you didn't combine it with the other thing, you'd be like, well, this is useless and doesn't do anything. And that was kind of whoa, that had me hooked. Now I'm like, okay, now you got my attention. And I just like video after video after video. And now I have a 14-step skincare routine, and it's not 14 steps it's not all at once. I have it's 5 steps in the morning, 4 steps at night, and then 6 additional different steps that I can mix in. Like there's a clay mask that I use on my nose now that is part of the morning routine, but only once a week because I don't want the redness. And there's a second mask that I use on the dry patches underneath my eyes, but I can't do that every day either because it would cause breakouts in the rest of my face. So it's really, it's interesting, but it's definitely made such a huge difference. And not everyone has the time or the money. I get it. But if someone had said to me, oh, you should really try this 10-step skincare routine, I would have been like, whatever, I don't have time. But it really doesn't take any time. It's just a couple extra steps. And to someone with ADHD who's like, that's just something else to forget. Now that I'm into it. Like I'm in the bathroom washing with these 3 fingers, applying with these 2 fingers, my middle finger and my ring finger, like patting in the moisturizer. And it feels as luxurious as
I don't
facial.
need to see any of the results to just know from the way you just described it that it's totally worth your time to do it. Like anything that like gives you that kind of pleasure to do, I do it. Like freaking do it. If you can afford it, do it.
Yeah.
Kind of like all that cool recovery stuff with running. Like if you can afford those awesome boots that you put on, like they might not change the game in any significant way, but do it, man,
Yeah, you're not behind if you can't afford it. You're not less than if you don't have access to it. If you have it, why not? That's kind of what we're trying to do in fitness protection. I want you to have all your bases covered, to have the basics, and everyone starts from the same place. And if you want to more and you want to add more, we can help you do that. But like it depends on the question that you're posing and how we're asking it. I think the Bosu is amazing, and I wish everyone would have one. And everyone coming to me for performance in a short period, I'm like, we really got to have Bosu. But if we have a longer view and we're a little more committed to some of the little things, and we're not like trying to play race against the clock to maximize results in a limited period, that's a different value proposition. We got a lot more flexibility. Now it's like, okay, do you want to get on the Bosu? You're motivated to get on the Bosu? Okay, then you know what? Here's the Bosu upgrade, which will be coming in 2020. I'm not sure when the beta test is going to start, but I'm probably not going to be able to work that in before Christmas because we got big plans. Even once we have you full time.
I mean, we have big plans for both of us this fall with podcasting and with new running content. And you, my friend, have a marathon to run. And aside from your skin, which I love, I really want to talk about your phone call with your coach that is up on YouTube, and we'll include the link in the show notes. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it already, you should definitely go and listen. So I loved hearing that. I loved hearing how positive she was and how encouraging and how excited for you she is. And I had met her before, which was really nice. I got to meet her at RRCA in June. And I love her demeanor. I can tell why she's a great coach for you. I can sort of imagine how coaching another coach would either be like other running coaches. I can imagine being either really coachable, which you clearly are, or kind of the worst to coach. So I think you guys are, you and Tia are lucky to have each other in a lot of ways. And so the first part of your talk, you're talking about sort of the next 4 to 6 weeks as you kind of build running back in. And I was so interested in how like she was very, I don't want to say vague, but she is really kind of letting you lead in a lot of ways. She's really encouraging you to listen to your body and make good choices. She's trusting you not to go too hard, too fast. Do you know, like, is that sort of her style generally? Is that her style with you because she knows you and she knows that like this is the approach to take with you? What do you think is sort of going on in her head as she's looking at you, and how is she approaching you as an athlete from your own experience as a coach?
Well, it's the same function. So to back up like kind of one step further. The tool that we use to communicate with each other primarily is Training Peaks. So she is the only coach I've ever met that coaches similarly to how I do, where I know she's reading, like she gets my training logs delivered to her in email form on a daily basis. So whenever, as soon as I've hit send in the training log, it goes to her inbox. She reads it and responds. And that is incredibly rare in coaches. Like it's a service that no one wants to pay for because it's a lot of time that adds up. And because no one trusts that you're reading unless you respond. Right. So I need that log. I do read it every day. I don't always, like for my one-on-ones, as you've seen, I don't always respond unless I feel compelled. But that information is easier than trying to go back, read it all, and play catch up after something has fallen off the wagon. Like everything was fine. Well, you mentioned this thing in your calf before, you know, 3 days ago or whatever. So we already have a good working relationship through Training Peaks because we're both on the same page and we're not having to perform for each other. Like we can really let that guard all the way down, which is a problem with coaches because people want you to perform for your money, like show me that you are tuned in. And I get it. But that's why I say that there's an asymmetry in the market when it comes to one-on-one coaching. People might want that personalized plan, but they don't really want to pay $120 for it, even though that takes 2 hours to put it together, start to finish, including the phone call with you to get to know you in order to make that plan. Second is that like you change over the course of a training cycle. So most people want to get value for their money and they see that it's like 4 months out. I want the maximum number of weeks for the minimum payment input. And the problem is as you train, you're getting stronger and your needs could change. So I know a lot of coaches that don't really want to schedule out beyond one macro cycle, which how long's a macro cycle, Coach Sarah?
Oh, shit. A macro cycle, I mean, so it's like a macro cycle is a training cycle. It's the microcycle is the 1 week or the 10 days or the whatever. That's like the unit, right? And the mesocycle is kind of it's the different pieces of your marathon cycle. Like this is the strength phase. This is the tempo phase. This is this, and this is the taper. And so I'm pretty sure the macro cycle is like the 20 week. This is like the ramp up to the marathon. That's a macro cycle. Did I get it right?
Yeah. All of these are kind of defined. Each coach looks at it a little bit differently. But so a microcycle can incorporate generally like 2 progressions and a hard workout. So if I'm working with you one-on-one, I might give you 2 weeks of the same hard type of tempo run to see if your body responds and how it changes from week to week. Because I assume the first one, you're not going to nail it. It's going to feel unfamiliar. You're going to be a lot more confident going into the second one. So one isn't going to be representative. The second one will be. And when I feel like we got what we needed out of that second one, then we'll move on. So that's where the microcycle comes from. The bigger pieces like the macrocycles is kind of like when you're stepping back and you're looking at the stepping stones we have to take. And what a client usually wants is like the minimum macrocycle that a client will demand, not like it was in a scenario from a coach. Like if we don't do either the whole plan and walk away from each other, you want to be touching base at least once a month. So it's more of a business aspect of where that comes from rather than a performance. Because very few coaches go into a relationship with the client expecting it to last for years and years. Like I've been working with Coach Tia since 2016 when I was able to say like, look, I cannot be objective about my own training and I need someone who can be, but who is also invested in the outcome, but not so much that they'll be gaming the system, right? Like I don't trust doctors when they put a success rate on their website because it's like what you see at Harvard, right? Like there's no permission to fail and learn. It's like, I want the best grades possible. So if you're going to want the best grades possible, then you're not going to learn anything. You're going to take the easy classes that you already know. You're not going to be challenged because there's no incentive to challenge. There's only incentive to get perfect grades. Yes, you don't want the surgeon who's failed a whole bunch, but you want one who's aware of mistakes and has the best practices. But there comes a certain point where you're performing to the number instead of doing your job well. And that's one of the reasons why I've set aside all those metrics. Several years ago, a couple people that were really enthusiastic about heart rate training came and said, like, we are both data scientists. We have heavy data backgrounds. We would love to put together some data for you that proves that this is a superior method that you could use in your marketing. And I was like, no, I appreciate it, but no. Number one, I don't have time to manage that process because if we were going to do that, I would want to be super cognizant about how it's done, which is not to say you would do it incorrectly, but I don't trust those numbers and here's why. And I feel like, I know I hurt their feelings when I said, seriously, thank you, but no thank you. I don't ever want to present my programs that way. I don't trust it because once we put a number there, then we're performing to it. And your performance should never be tied to my success, not at this level. It's like, have you been doing the runs? Do you hate it? Do you like being here? Great. Like your performance should not justify the price you pay to be here. And it shouldn't justify like coming back. You know what I mean? Like I feel that's the symmetric expectation, but like I get that with Coach Tia. Like she knows if I have a bad day, she's not going to get fired. When you have that sort of comfort level, like we clearly do, and this is the final thing I say, kind of like why about I chose her. I know I have ADHD. I know I'm a motor mouth, and she is, as you saw, If I start speaking, she stops talking. So it's incentive to be like, hi, what do you have to say? And then hear her perspective on me, like kind of forces me to be unnatural, but not out of shame.
Yeah.
It's out of interest. She has a lot to say.
Yeah. Hearing her perspective on you, that's exactly what I loved about listening in on this call. It felt like eavesdropping. It was kind of funny. And I really want to talk about that part. This was, I think, the part where she talked the most at a stretch was when you asked her about getting back to your former level. You said, I told you my PRs. Do you think I can get back there? And she said, and I didn't totally transcribe it word for word, but I kind of paraphrased. I think you're going to be shocked actually by what your body can do. This is her talking to you. If you had spent the last 10 years giving it all you got, I might say this might be sort of the end, but you have all this energy in your muscles and you're ready and they need to be used. And I think the next 3 to 5 years is a great window to do whatever you need to do to let your ability out. You owe it to yourself. And then she said this thing, and this is what I'm really interested in hearing you talk about a little bit more. I think women have a good 5 to 10 year range of consistent hard training, and you haven't really used that yet. And so I heard that and I was like, wow. So what does that mean? Because I've heard this elsewhere too, and I've heard people probably like kind of misunderstand what's meant by it. But like, if you've been running for more than 10 years, then your chances of getting faster aren't nearly as good as the person who started running much, much later in life. Like I hear a lot of that type of thing, like, oh wow, you didn't start running until you were 40, cool, fresh legs, like all this stuff. So every time I hear something like that, I'm like, well, I've been running for 14 years. I'm only 33. Have I used myself all up? Yeah. Like what's meant by that? When you heard that, what did you hear?
Well, it's what I say to people, like, you haven't even started. You have no idea what you're capable of. What they hear is me invalidating all the work they've done. And that always hurts me because that's the opposite of what I mean. There's a big difference between end-to-end cycles of consistent training over time versus showing up, doing an event, demanding a result, not getting it, saying you're going to keep the fitness, but not really keeping the fitness because there's no race on the schedule, coming back because you need a race on the schedule, and trying to get there again. Like it's almost like a boom-bust cycle. And that is common. That is so common. We've normalized it, but it's not what most of the higher level athletes do. But remember, I only do it because I was traumatized at a young age by my father's heart attack and genetics, and that this could be me at 33 if I'm not careful. So when I say I never expected to live this long before I was raped, it was like you could die at 33 just like your dad nearly did. So, that's enough to scar a young kid, but I don't say my PRs out loud because I can't back them up, and that's true. When I ran them all, it was pre-Garmin, and it was before we ever expected that Athlinks or Strava would happen because it was just different. Right. No one really cared. Races were smaller. Banditing was less of a big deal. I don't know, because insurance regulations were different. So there are a lot of reasons why banditing has become this thing that used to be the Boston tradition has now become super duper complicated because the world has changed and the business has changed. At the same time, once upon a time, it was not a thing. Like showing up with someone else's bib was not cheating. I was hiding. I didn't think I deserved to be there. And also I couldn't afford it. When I say like I couldn't afford like even like a $35 entry fee to a marathon, I couldn't. Like I was thumbing rides there and I was ashamed of myself. Remember, I made everybody wait for a whole hour that first time. And I had no perspective on my running after that because I just assumed that I sucked and I stopped asking questions. And I didn't think I could call myself a real runner until I broke 3 in the marathon. And I wasn't doing real hard workouts in between because I remember opening up my first marathon plan and looking at it and I couldn't read it. It was written in what I call track language. And I say it's not to denigrate track athletes, but it's not a generally commonly accepted language. If you don't know what those 2 apostrophes versus 1 apostrophe means, and back then there was no Google and it was assumed to be known, so there was no key in the book either. So I just kept doing what I was doing and then running with these guys on the weekends, and their easy effort pace was so much faster than mine that I just did whatever they did. So I would do effectively a 16 or 20 mile tempo run, which I would never recommend to anyone. But the fact that I could hang, that was what impressed Coach Tia. So we talked about that and I gave her my PRs and said, look, this is how I feel about it. I really want to get them all in my own name so that I'm not hiding from them anymore. I can claim that as me, but I'm in no time pressure in order to do that. I would rather do this for the long term. I'm 41 next week and I don't care if I hit these at 45 or if I hit them at 65. I really, truly don't. And that was where she was like, okay, well, I'll give you my response in the cast. You could tell I teared up when she said that. I was just because my times are fast. I mean, they're fast. They talk about in your RSC certification that you have different body types, not like a xenomorph versus an ectomorph or whatever, but rather you've got like the speed demons versus the endurance. So you got people that are really powerful and better, more built for the short distance versus people that are just, endurance monsters that can go for days and days and days. And she's like, you're the first person I've seen in a long time that's both. And that's really rare and that's really cool. It's too bad no one told you were good at this when you were younger.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah.
That really got me. That wasn't the first time I've heard it, but it was the first time I believed it.
Coming from her specifically, that's really meaningful. She's not a big gestures, big words type of person. She's got a pretty quiet demeanor. Mm-hmm. I think she's very powerful when she talks and everybody listens, but I keep coming back to quiet, and I feel like that's the wrong word for it. But she has a kind of a quiet power, and she wouldn't. And I know just from like being in a room with her for the smaller part of 2 days that she would never say anything like that without really meaning it.
Oh yeah, and what I pay her is so minimal. Like when you see what other one-on-one coaches cost and what they do for it. I'm not famous. I'm not fast at the moment by the traditional standards of fast in that world, where just to have an elite on my roster, I'm going to charge you nothing, right? I don't fit any of those boxes. She has no reason to BS me. And so to hear her saying that now is like, okay, you've got my attention. And that is a really powerful thing to have somebody believing in you that isn't just trying to sell you something.
Yeah. For the record, when you say to me, you haven't even gotten started, like I believe you, and I don't hear that as you invalidating the work that I've done in my time as a runner. I think that you see it very clearly and a lot of my backstory. But the reason that I, in my head, am like, but have I used a bunch of time up? I don't know, is because I was probably overtrained for a good portion of that time. Not continuously, but at least for the year 2007 and probably for most of the year 2010, I was kind of out of control and did not know it and did not think I was doing enough. And then there were other periods in between where I kind of swung back and forth. The years when I first started running, initially, I think I really just loved it and was kind of captivated by how quickly, and I see this in language learners, the first year of learning a language, you just learn so much in such a short amount of time. You go from literally zero to being able to carry on a halting conversation in a foreign language, even if it's a halting conversation about nothing. That is a huge leap. And teaching the first semester of Italian, I always said this, was the most satisfying thing in the world because I loved watching students just be amazed by themselves. Then you get into second semester. Now we're like learning double prepositions and the subjunctive, and everyone's like, ugh. And everything feels really hard and you don't feel like you're really getting better. And I hit that after probably 2 years of running. That was really when I started feeling like, all right, now in order to prove that I deserve to be here, I need to break 4 hours in the marathon and I'm going to do it. And that was the year that I ran 3 marathons in 12 months. The third one was New York City. And I honestly was so ready to be done marathon training, but I got in through the lottery. It was, what, am I going to not run New York City Marathon? And that was the training cycle where I got to the 20-mile run and I couldn't do it. Because I was so demoralized. I was so tired. I mean, this is like anyone who knows anything looks at me and goes, you are overtrained as fuck, miss. You got to stop what you're doing. I was like crying in my bed, hiding under the covers. And my boyfriend, who's now my husband, was sitting on my bed next to me going like, you don't have to do this, like you do not have to run that marathon. No one is going to think less of you. Like, oh my God, look at yourself. And I was like, they are too going to think less of me. Everyone's going to know that I was supposed to do it. And then I did. I'm not a quitter. I'm not oh my God, I was not a quitter. But now I look back at myself in that year, especially, and then in some of the subsequent years and say like, man, I had no business running 50 miles a week. And 50 miles a week isn't even that much, for people that are like really like high level athletes. 50 miles a week is nothing. But
I mean, how many did you run last week?
Last week I ran 48. No, look, I know. I mean, I'm in a completely different phase, and that's amazing. That really is amazing. 50 miles for me in 2007 was overtrained as fuck, not getting what I wanted. Those are the years that I ran my PRs in the half and full marathon, and I'm still far away from those. I might have a great marathon in September. I don't really know, and I'm not going into it saying that it needs to be a PR by any stretch of the imagination because I just don't know what's going to happen. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen, but I know that there's a really strong possibility that nope, not going to get that close this time, and that's okay. So I kind of associate running at that level again, we're talking like 4:07 is my marathon PR. I don't have to hide from it because I use my own name and no one's going to disbelieve me. I wouldn't lie about running, a 4:07. Now, that would be really thrilling to run that. But in 2007, I wanted to break 4 hours and I didn't. And therefore, I just wasn't working hard enough. So I associate running that pace, that level with being overtrained and with being in way over my head. And the one time I really tried again to break 4 hours was when I ran Marine Corps in 2010. I remember the mindset of that training cycle so much. That was when I bought Advanced Marathoning, the Fitzinger.
Feisinger. It's a good book.
I'm sure it is. I had no business using it for training, and I didn't really even understand half of what it was talking about. Now that I've taken the RCA course, I have a lot more context for what it's talking about and what it's trying to communicate and who the target audience is, which is not a grad student who is just like, I'm going to try really hard to run my desired fantasy race pace in these race pace miles and hope that it works out. And so that was my husband and I got married in 2010. We came back from our wedding, no honeymoon, dove right back into grad school, both of us. And he was trying to get into law school, and he had taken the LSAT, had not gotten the score that he wanted. He was really disappointed in himself. I had not gotten my 4-hour marathon. When I tried to do it, I was really disappointed in myself. So we were like, all right, we're going to buckle down. And Saturday was like hell day. So on Saturdays, he was going to do his full length LSAT practice test, which was like a thing that he dreaded and hated and just didn't want to do, but knew he had to do it. And I was going to do my long runs, which I dreaded and hated and didn't want to do, but just had to do it. And that was like the mentality of that training cycle. And in retrospect, is it any wonder that I like completely flamed out at mile 11 of that marathon and was hobbling the rest of the way because I couldn't not finish because I would never have recovered from like, oh my God, right? So I think to myself, like, did I use it all up for nothing,
No. That's not how it works. So right now, to give you guys context, I'm training 2 elites, one male, one female, and both of them are a lot of work. And I say that lovingly because they're so close to things that it's complicated. When you have a tube of toothpaste, as I said in the past, I think that's what you wanted to call this podcast. When you have a tube of toothpaste and it's full, you can squeeze it anywhere and something's going to come out. When you're me, and you have a nearly empty tube of toothpaste that you're not getting rid of because you got a couple more good brushes in there, and that's money you're throwing away. I can be really cheap at the weirdest times.
Oh my God, me too. Seriously. I relate to that so much.
But then trying to get that last little bit out, you got to know, like, hold it the right way and pull it. Like, you can't just put it on the counter and rub your finger over it. You got to like work it out. Like, it's really, really complicated. It's a thing. It's a whole thing. And that is where you get eventually with a person. So someone with a training age of 0, kind of like your language learner first year, there's no telling where they can go. We don't know anything yet. And it takes a month in working in Training Peaks, like to tie off a loose end earlier. So it takes a month to get to know somebody in Training Peaks because all the numbers you're looking at, the numbers that matter, are 42-day rolling averages. So that means I need 42 days of data, which is 30 days of workouts. And that can take a lot longer to do, right? It might take 60 days to get 30 days of workouts, but we need that with no big continuous, like obvious gaps or weeks off or vacations for me to get to know like a visual representation of your body and a response to a given stimulus at any point in time. So when you're not going consistently, when you're only doing 2 or 3 days a week, those numbers, they're meaningless, unfortunately, because the deviations are too high. So that's one of the reasons why I started off being like, I can't train anyone one-on-one that's running less than 5 days a week. Like, I just can't do my job. There's no point in paying for a one-on-one coach if that person is me. I'm sure there are plenty of other one-on-one coaches that would disagree with that and say, well, it depends on the person, and that would be correct. There's someone like Kara Goucher who has been running her entire life at a really high level. She can probably get away with running 2 or 3 days a week. But I don't get Kara Gouchers. That's not my demographic. The people who would consider hiring me as a coach, they're usually not at that level. Most of them are full tubes of toothpaste, with 2 exceptions. So my male elite has asked me more than once, are you sure we can do this? Meaning that I'm still the right coach for him. And I'm like, yes. Once you have locked in the basics, it'll be time to pass you over to someone whose skill set exceeds mine in this area, who only does this. But until you have locked in all the basics, that person is not going to be interested in you. They're going to say, get your shit together and ignore you. And they're right. But which is not to say you don't have your shit together. It's just there are 2 more basics that we need to lock in. So when you think about what are those basics, one of them is strength and the other is, I would say, sort of a mental block. Believing it. There's a part of him that still doesn't believe it. I had believed it wholeheartedly since the first time I saw him. And fun fact, he failed the chair test when I got him as a client after running a 2:59 at Boston.
Wow.
So, like, he had no hip strength. I spoke with Alex Lanton after he left the office, and he was like, how did that guy break through in the marathon? He can't get out of a chair in the system. I'm like, I know, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be fun. It's going to be intellectually challenging. So he just ran a 2:41 in Houston. He's really fast. He passes the chair test now. But there are a couple more basics. I'm like, this cycle, we're nearly there. I think after this cycle, like, he'll be, even if he doesn't hit his goal, I think at this point, as long as he doesn't lose sight of the basics, he'll be ready for a better coach than me. So there are a couple of different ways you could present that information, right? Like, MK thinks she's qualified to coach all these sub 3 hour marathoners. I'm like, no. If his toothpaste tube was empty, and you can empty it out at 3:15, I mean, you could empty it out absolutely anywhere, but he hadn't. So I'm like, this is where I can play. I play in the basics. Let's master all the basics. You've got real talent. It's too bad no one told you sooner. But I look at him and I see me. And I see that same battle that I was still having back when someone took me aside and said, look, you could be really fucking amazing if you just get your head out your ass and do the work. Which I was doing the work, but I didn't think I was good. And nothing was going to convince me. So those are all opportunities wasted.
That's so fascinating.
But I digress. When I talk about what that full tube of toothpaste looks like, pretty much any marathon book ever written has had the same selling point, and there's a marathon plan in there. So everybody reads the marathon plan, they don't read the book. And that's not an indictment.
That's what people really want, right? They're like, okay, just give me the work. Just, let me go do it. Yeah, I'm here for the plan. Yep.
I'm here for the plan. I'm ready. Yeah, I'm totally the demographic. I'm totally the demographic. I know I am. What do you mean? I'm advanced. But his definition of advanced, okay, fine, whatever. Part of the reason I started fitness protection was I wanted to guide a very different conversation rather than battle with someone's ego when the selection process itself lends the ability to make poor decisions or the wrong choices. So rather than comparing me to other coaches or my plan to other plans or my special speed work to other people's speed work, it's about looking at my client base and looking around and saying, am I like everyone else? Cool. I belong here and these plans are going to work. So it's a different presentation of the same material. But I also remember, because this, the criticism that comes my way will never not sting. I remember saying in a podcast once, someone asked me how long it takes to maximize cardiovascular ability. And I said 2 years of continuous training. And they were like, wait, so we're not going to be in a position to perform at a marathon until we've been doing this continuously for 2 years? And I'm like, basically. They were really angry, and rightfully so. I never would have bought this plan if you put it that way, that I have to go work 2 years first. I'm like, exactly, but that doesn't mean the other plan's better. Like, I would agree the sales pipeline is broken, but it matches every other sales pipeline out there based on what you're going to pick, not what's right for you. So it's a conundrum. But if we were just speaking very straightforward, we're talking in terms of even my dad coming out of that heart attack. How long is it going to take for my heart to be fully rehabilitated? 2 years. 2 years with no setbacks. 2 years of continuous jogging and strengthening with no setbacks, then we can say there, your heart is about as fundamentally strong as it's going to get. And then we need to be careful about how we challenge it. So give us 2 years of jogging and then you can do some high interval workouts, or you could add some strength running in there. But it's knowing about what the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle are and how and when to apply them. And we live in a world where I don't want to pay a coach unless that coach is providing specialized knowledge. I'm going to make that coach earn their money, give me specialized workouts without asking, am I really at a point of fitness where I will benefit from those super duper specialty special workouts? Steve Magness is the coachiest coach out there. He wrote The Science of Running, and he has a Facebook group called Science of Running centered around the book and the principles. And if you look on his website before you buy that book and you say, like, well, I want the best plan, so it's going to be Steve's, you need to go look at the requirements are for his athletes. You probably don't fit it. You got to break 1630 in the 5K before he'll take you on. And that's implied you need to be fit enough and strong enough. If you aren't fit enough, if you haven't maximized all the basics and hit this number, then we're not going to be a good fit. So it sounds glib when a coach says, like the coach said to me, tighten up, get fit again, and then come find me. It sounds cruel, but it's practical. It's a specialized subsection of running. If you can't pass the chair test, you probably don't need to be doing hill repeats because you're going to mess up your knees and pierce your SI joint. I mean, yes, you can absolutely get stronger, but that's the wrong argument. Can you, in your body as it is right now, get stronger from this? We could get strong all these other ways. Let's take the low-hanging fruit first, lock in the basics, and then move from there. So that 3 to 5 year window she's talking about as pertains to me, and I'll tell you how this applies to you in a minute. I've been doing this for a really long time, so there's a lot of muscle memory. There's a lot of neuropatterning, which if you've seen from my runs, my heart rate is fine, my steps are fine, but my lungs can't keep up because I've been off my feet for 6 weeks. So the critical adaptations in my feet that are hard to explain because there are so many of them, but like when I finish a run, my ankles hurt, my metatarsals hurt, my IT band is a little sore. And that comes from, all those adaptations go away when you're lying down. It's not about fitness level. My muscles are definitely still there. I take my shirt off and it doesn't look that different when you're looking at my abs, but that doesn't tell you anything specific to the race. My body is not used to bearing its own weight on top of my feet at the moment. So that's the first thing we need to get back by moving frequently enough that we're getting those crucial adaptations in my tendons, joints, and ligaments without hurting anything. Right. And that's not going to come from hard effort workouts.
That's why your next 4 to 6 weeks are jogging basically at least 5 days a week, for not a super crazy amount of time. And she's not telling you have to make sure you do this long. She's telling you, between this and this, and kind of letting you go from there, because that's what you really need.
Yep. Today's going to be a shorter day. I'm looking at strained, and everything looks strained in my training peaks. It looks strained in my polar. I woke up and was like, I kind of want to run, but I also want to sleep another half hour, which is a good sign that those points are accurate. So I might go for a walk or a very light jog later this evening, but I might not. And that's okay too. So it's not the fear of what will happen if I don't. It's the fear of what could happen if I do. And that's the framework I need to be using for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So it's not to say that every time we hit the reset button, we go back to zero. That's why rebuild exists. And rebuild is going to be designed a little bit differently, but look a lot the same to build when we open build. When you're building for the first time, the type of stress and the order in which we would put the little pieces together is decidedly different than someone who's coming back either from an extended period of being in bed, like I did the first time. She brought me back from that, but also from another 6 weeks off where I feel like Gumby again. I'm definitely stronger. Yeah. I'm definitely better off in a lot of ways that you heard me articulate. My joints no longer feel soft. I can move my arms without it hurting my neck. Like it's night and day different. Thank God for the surgery. But like clearly that sister's doing more than my doctors thought it was. Either that or the Mirena or the combination. I don't know. But point is this, it's not that every time our training age falls to zero, our experience level still matters, but how we capitalize on it differs. So if I had been training consistently, jogging with my dad for 2 years, like I did from the time I was 6 until I was about 10, and that was when I took my first break in running. It wasn't like a drastic break, like 8 years long. It was, I played basketball. So more jogging in the morning wasn't fun when I was doing all that hard running on the junior high basketball team. I started again after I quit basketball, or didn't make the high school basketball team rather. And I started jogging again later after my first boyfriend broke up with me. And that was real heartbreak. And I had lost a lot of weight and I got a lot of reinforcement for losing a lot of weight. Well, you look really great. You'll get another boyfriend in no time. And from there, I started jogging again, and that's where it came back into play. And I remember that really, really clearly. But the point of the matter is, in those years, from when I was 6 to I was 10, we had definitely maximized all I was going to be able to get from jogging. After 2 years of this continualness, of this continual work, this continuity, continualness. Come on, Harvard.
I'm not an asshole. I may be from Harvard, but I'm not an asshole.
2 years of continuity. 2 years of continuity with no breaks and no major injuries. It is implied that the foundational strength is there, because back then you didn't have people like going and taking the chair test, for example, and there's no good way to administer it, so why would you talk about it? Now we know with overuse injuries and whatnot that we have a lot more knowledge than we did before, but the general idea was you need to be running 3 to 5 miles per day, 4 to 5 days a week for at least a year before you would even consider marathon training. That's where that rule of thumb comes from, but that's not what people do. Shows like The Biggest Loser have now glorified, like not just couch to 5K, but couch to marathon, couch to Leadville. Let's go, coach. And I'm like, don't make this about me. Like, I'm not a magician, and I don't want people to get hurt. But the mindset is I can't find the consistency unless I have a big goal. Without the big goal, I'm never going to get there. But that works as well for saving money, for losing weight. It's just not a mindset that works, but it's a very American thing. And it's hard to fight that broad general mindset in a big way. So 2 years of jogging consistently, we've probably maximized all of the cardiovascular gains you're going to be able to get. It's time for the next step. So I would argue, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying you could. I'd like to wait a really long time before introducing the hard workouts. And the hard workouts are not like the sort of thing we're doing in Rebuild. In Rebuild, it's very specific to maximizing cardiovascular function in a very specific way,
Rebuild
trying to, again, pull you up the curve faster. Rebuild. Those are all specific cardiovascular maximizing workouts. In Maintain, that's not specific speed work. It's non-specific speed work. It's fitness work. You're maintaining fitness and readiness and the mental capability to slide back into a program at will. We're also, if your glutes are a little weak, you're going to feel it because you're going to, those harder efforts are going to hurt. And hopefully that's incentive enough to come back in and dial back in to the strength with you each day. So all of this is designed with a very psychological underpinning that I have witnessed over the years years of observing runners who came into running through a very different perspective than I did. The former track stars, the former college basketball or high school basketball players. Everyone comes from or the people that just wanted to lose the baby weight. Trying to put them all in the same category where they really do belong without hurting anyone's feelings has been a really tricky thing to do, but physiologically it's not that challenging. It's creating the pipeline that makes them okay with it. That was the hard part. And I feel like we've done that. No one feels like I'm in a room full of people like me without asking the question of what kind of an athlete are you? And I like that. I don't want to stay there. We will never segregate on the basis of pace, but you get to opt into whatever like harder plan you want without being otherized. I really don't want to separate the marathon plans. So everyone gets a new one. Like you don't have to get faster to get a new plan. You're going to get a new one every 6 months.
When you have no business buying advanced marathoning. Because you're still going to get a new plan. I'm still going to get a new plan. Everyone's going to get a new plan.
You can be in rebuild for 18 months and not have the same plan twice. You can be in maintain for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years and not get the same plan twice. That's intentional. I get that's really what you're paying for. That's why we're able to price it at $30, right? Having people come back even in a month where they're not necessarily like using us, that allows us the ability to keep generating new stuff as long as we grow. And that to me is really exciting. What you're paying for is the reset button, a brand new plan, and a fresh start on the first day of each month. And that to so many people, or at least to me, is totally worth it.
I've been doing more or less maintain because, previously your monthly plans were kind of, that was a similar idea, I think. And I was doing the monthly plans for I don't even know. I can't even keep track at this point. Since October 2017, I've been in this kind of month to month. I have not had, a ramp up to any big race. This will be my first marathon in 2 years coming up. And this is absolutely, this is the most successful I've ever felt. This is the most fun I've ever had as a runner. I think you are so right on about it. And it really, it's exciting too, to see that people are having fun with it and kind of, I think they're listening to these conversations. I'm listening to these conversations and learning about the ways that my mindset has so often gotten in my way in ways that I never even realized before, which I think is really, really cool. And I think going to RRCA kind of crystallized it for me because I went to RRCA and I saw like the 10 years ago version of myself. I'm not saying this to like sort of insult the other people or say that I'm better or more evolved than them or anything like that, because that's absolutely not true. We had honestly all sorts of people, and I talked with a lot of people that I think are going to be amazing coaches. But I saw in the way we sort of talked about runners and categorized runners and thought about like the way runners approach their training, I was like, oh yeah, that's where I saw the me of 10 years ago, Yeah.
They're not wrong. They're not wrong. Who's going to hire you? They do a very good job of synthesizing the current business of coaching, not trying to influence where it needs to go, but preparing everyone, grounding them very well in the reality of this is going to be hard, and trying to find a niche for yourself is going to be very, very difficult, because at the end of the day, what they want is the magic speed work. And you'll always get people that are coming to you looking for the magic plan, the thing that they've never heard before, but it's going to be impossible eventually to come up with something new. And I'm like, So I remember hearing all that. And again, it's totally correct and true, and thinking there's got to be a different way. With my business background, with my different approach, with the fact that I came to this from a position of cardiovascular rehab from a young age, there has to be value in this different mindset, this different approach that I have that could be helpful to other people. So, which is a very long way of meandering and coming back to your original question. I've been doing this for 35 years, almost 36. I started jogging at, 34, almost 35 years. I started jogging at 6. I'm about to turn 41. And Coach Tia has said, I've not even entered my 3 to 5 year window yet. So if you're hearing, like, well, I've been running for 14 years, I'm done. Wrong. I've been running for 35 and I'm not started. Where that comes from, if once we start and you're looking ahead, and this is the first time I've been totally unobstructed is how I would look at it. I am done having babies. I am done with stupid stuff. I am coachable. I am lovable. I am found a coach that I connect with, and I'm ready to go. And that is the magic lineup required to start pushing forward. So phase 1, if I wasn't already signed up for New York, if I hadn't already deferred, I wouldn't be doing it right now. But it might be my last shot to get the entrance in the gifted way.
Well, and you get to have a day where you have no expectations. Like you really do get to walk into it the way you did. What year was it? 2015. Yeah. And you talk about that as one of your best races you've ever had. So.
Oh yeah. Because it was so much better than what I expected. And I knew I could have gone faster.
That was like my New York in 2007 after
I
was I was in such bad shape. I had to I didn't stop training, but I cut way back, which put my expectations in the toilet. And even when I was on the Staten Island ferry going to the start, I remember my aunt dropped me off at 4 a.m. or whatever at the Staten Island ferry. She was like, I still can't believe you're actually going to do this. And I was like, I'm not actually sure I'm going to do this. I got on the ferry thinking maybe there's still a chance that I won't actually start. But of course I started, and I had the best day. That's why I love the New York City Marathon, and it's the one like major marathon besides Boston. It's the one major marathon where I'm like, I need to do that again. I need to do it again because I had just the most magical day, and I completely blew myself away by what I could do by being a little underprepared as opposed to massively overtrained, really, not overprepared, overtrained, and it was magical. Yeah. And so you get to have that, and it may be a long time before you're in a position to have a race like this again. Especially if you're starting to like really do a big push. This is kind of a magical moment in some ways.
So it's going to be a good 2 years of trying to get to that point of re-achieving cardiovascular maximization to realize all the abilities that I had when I was younger. And once we've gotten there, hopefully it'll be a function of speed. When it comes to any runner, first we maximize cardiovascular function. We can do that while working on strength. At the same time, we can push those two levers simultaneously. Then we maintain the strength while pushing the lever of running through strength, which is the hill repeats, the track stuff, the longer tempo runs. If we have not taken the time to balance out the foundational strength, like using the loops and trying to pass the chair test, if we don't do that first, we're going to get injured before we get faster. And she knows that she doesn't have to have this conversation with me. If I get injured, it's more likely to be a fluke that we don't see coming and not trying to get me out of my way, because she knows I'm methodical about it, and I would probably go about it a lot more slowly than I would with her. So her timeline for me, she's like, originally what I said was, these are my PRs. I would like to get back there. I understand it might take 5 to 7 years, but I got nothing but time. So when she was like, oh, it's not going to take that long, I was like, oh, wow. Okay, let's do it. So how that 3 to 5 year window applies is exactly that. Once we have maximized the fundamentals, all of them, assuming we can do that in 2 years. And it's for some people, it might take 35 years before you start mastering all the fundamentals and really listening and making the right things and being coachable. From that point, we have 3 to 5 good years of hard training with periods of backing off and then pushing again. Backing off, coming out of an overtrained state, and then pushing again before we kind of hit that point where it's like, now we're just beating ourselves up. Like, your central nervous system doesn't respond well to that long a period. There's a Canadian runner who's a best friend of Lauren Fleshman, who is re-entering competitive marathoning. And after a long, long break, you might have seen her tweeting about it a couple weeks ago. I'm so glad my best friend is back in the game. And part of that was, there were a lot of injuries. She went off and did other things and is now coming back and it's like, I'm ready to make a push again. So I would say from where she's starting here, she's probably got a good 3 years from this point pushing forward if she remains uninjured and has positive experiences. And you can go if you use those 3 years in your younger years. And again, this is not for like the casual runner. This is not for you and me. This is more like for an elite, sub-elite, before your central nervous system is going to be ready to return to that, where the thought of running is still not going to be more of weighing you down, where you're excited about the work and not just the goal. Because that central nervous system overstimulation is a real thing. I've compared it before to like standing in your child's face and screaming, and they just look at you like a deer in headlights and they absorb nothing that you just said. It's possible to do that to your central nervous system, and that's what we do when we introduce too much simultaneously. Like when we go from couch to triathlon, I've met a lot of those people in the past too. They burn out a lot more quickly because it's not that they're afraid to do more work. It's just they didn't adopt one after the other in a methodical, thoughtful manner. It's why I haven't reintroduced Pilates yet, even though Pilates isn't that hard. It still adds something, and it really adds up. So I'm going to be going back in slowly, adding 1 or 2 days a week, probably in 2 or 3 weeks, and no sooner, because I need to keep moving forward, and I'm being very thoughtful about how I pull it all together. So once that 3-year window has kind of opened, I'll make sure y'all know it. But this is also why I say y'all might have had 4 or 5 hard months of training followed by periods off, whether or not you admit it, because you're going to give the right answer instead of the true answer. Is your baby sleeping on the back or the front? Okay. Did you really keep up the running after the marathon? It's okay. There's no judgment here. It's just I can't do my job if you're not giving me accurate information. And that's really what it all comes down to. And I don't know if that feels like that was a whole lot of words and you didn't answer my question. It's just not as straightforward as we expect it to be.
You answered my question.
A woman's central nervous system, we have it in men it's a little bit longer, but not much longer, where once you've locked in all the fundamentals, we've got a good 3 to 5 year window where you can push really, really hard before we say, you know what, there's no sense in doing all of this. Let's relax, pick the parts you like, and put the rest aside. Stressing about performance is not going to do you any good. It's easy to go hard. It's hard to go smart. But it doesn't mean the dream is dead. It means we need to refocus and just sort of let things happen.
No, you did answer my question. I mean, because what I was really asking about was what she means when she says the 3 to 5 year window, the 5 to 10 years of good hard training, like these different things that she's referencing in numbers. And I think people hear that because I've heard it interpreted this way as like, oh, if you're newer to running, that means you're fresher, but you're saying that's not what that means. Actually, that's kind of a misapplication. It's a
different spin. Yeah. I think so. Like the elite that I'm thinking of, and the reason I started that answer with the dude that I'm thinking of, what I said to him, we got one more cycle before I think I'm going to be confident enough to pass you on and say the fundamentals are locked in, because that reflects on me as a coach. If I call up a coachy coach who's like, who the F are you? And I'm like, hi, I'm MK Fleming at the Fitness Protection Program. Like, what? I'm from Lifetime Run. Here's this person. I think he's at your level. I look like an idiot. And I'd rather not do that because I'm not in the same game as these guys. I don't coach the same people. So the fact that I would have one is kind of absurd. But this guy will be. Once I passed him over, knowing what will happen, I'd say he might have 2 to 3 years max before he's like, I'm done. And it's not a physiological thing because we've yet to capitalize on all of, he's capable of qualifying for the trials and then some. He's good. But it's not about talent past a certain point. It's about your life and your ability to do the work and balance that with the other responsibilities that come along with the life. And this is our prime. We're in our 40s. I got a good 10 years, realistically, before menopause is fully expected to come in. So I'm looking at a 7 to 9 year window to work with. And that's sort of what before the next big hormonal change comes. The first one comes at around 14 to 16. The second one comes around 24 to 25. Then the third one comes at, 48 to 55. Somewhere in there. So what she's really saying is before the next big hormonal change happens and we have to relearn your body, we've got a window for performance and we really need to maximize
that's cool. Yeah.
And I'm ready to do
I don't want to go on for too much longer because I know we've talked for a long time. I could talk about this with you all day, but people can only run for so long for their weekend long run. But I just, I'm really responding especially to what you're saying about kind of balancing this makes it sort of boils it down to be simpler than what you're really saying, but balancing your life with running and making running part of your life. Because I'm in this interesting place where like the reason I was killing myself in 2010 to get that sub 4 was because I was like, well, that's the first step to finally getting a BQ. And that was when for me getting a BQ would have been a 340. We are so far from that now. Oh my God. I still have a BQ on the brain for someday. And from where I am right now, that is very far. And I don't, but so I remember you talking about A races. This is a long time ago. I remember you talking about A races. I remember you talking about like the goal being kind of the long-term thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. A BQ doesn't get me out of bed in the morning though. It's like a thing that would be really cool if it happened. And I do hope and believe that it will happen someday in my life, if for no other reason, because I plan to stick around. And at some point I'll still be running and the qualifying times will be more within my reach. And I don't plan to I don't plan to let it all go between now and then. But I really like my life right now. And I think about what my life was like when I was training for Marine Corps. And I was so bummed out all the time. Like I felt so like I wasn't good enough and I had all these things that I just needed to work harder and achieve. And so I have a very different approach to it from what I had even 2 years ago when I was training for Twin Cities. And I was like, all right, Twin Cities, this is the target, but the goal is the big thing. It's not even that anymore. It's kind of like, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. What motivates me is liking how I look in the strength videos when I do them in the Facebook group. I'm motivated by how I feel every day. And so I don't feel like oh, this is, all in service of some big dream that I'm going to be patient for, but it's out there or whatever. I like the way things feel. And there's a part of me that's excited about the idea of like, oh, there could be more for me, but also I don't really want anything to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's when the magic happens. What you just described. When you look back when you were trying to qualify for Boston in 2007, you were trying to prove something. You were probably pretty stressed out. You were not taking care of yourself when it comes to eating. You probably weren't sleeping enough. You were meeting up with people around whom you felt less than and felt like you had something to prove. There was a lot in your life that was geared towards trying to prove something to yourself and to others. You are older now. You're wiser now. You've still got a lot to put to rest as an overachiever and as a people pleaser. At the same time, you now understand that thing inside you that needs to be laid to rest is not going to come from qualifying for Boston. And that's the magical setup. Once you've left Harvard, which, not to beat up on Harvard, But walking onto campus each day has to be a little bit of, this is the place where you didn't get the job. This was the place that didn't open the doors. All that work, not for nothing, but you did everything right and you were denied the reward. Once you're no longer there by your choice, not because you didn't get it, but because you're walking to something better, that mentality is going to be such a relief off your shoulders that everything else you do is something that you've chosen to do. And there's power in that. And man, you got there at 33. I didn't get there till 37, where I was doing something I never planned to do and loved every minute of it to a certain point. And now I look ahead and I think like, man, as long as my husband's alive and we're good and our bases are covered, there's no stop. I can do anything I want. What are those things going to be? And everything is good and fun and invigorating and exciting, and not like, oh, I better qualify for Boston or no one's going to hire me as a coach. There was a part of me that felt I needed to perform in order to have the credibility, but now I see I don't need it anymore. So if I'm not performing for you, then I'm doing it for me. And what I do for me is make good choices to see how long I can keep going. And I think you've never been there before with anything. And so for you to not be in competition with anything external and not driven by the need to prove anything internally, that is the setup for magic. And that's why I think like you're a lot closer than you think you are. When did you start the monthly plan?
Middle of October 2017, 2 weeks after Twin Cities Marathon, where I had a cold, had a shitty day, tried to put a good face on it. Had a great weekend.
Had any big breaks since? Yeah. Had Pace gotten any faster?
Like a little. Oh yeah.
Has it plateaued?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, with the weather, it kind of goes up and down.
How about your efficiency factor?
Well, I don't look at like, you always say that you can never look at it on one day, and I don't look at it every day. But I guess, overall, if I were to, the times that I look at it, I don't know, probably though.
Okay. What I'm saying is this, you have now been doing this nearly 2 years. You're at that point where if you wanted to start a push, you could start a push. I would not have advised it while you were looking for a job, while you were trying to perpetuate your career, while you had so much on the line. But this time next year, with 3 years behind you, it'll be a different conversation. It'll be, Sarah, if you think you're ready, then let's start moving some of these pieces aside to make room for training so that you can, if that's your choice. If you decide to have another child, if you decide to, there are other things that could happen, other choices that you could make. And it's hard to keep training like I was. Like I needed to try at Pittsburgh one more time so that I could put that part of me to bed where people won't take me seriously if I haven't qualified for Boston with the number that they can see. Because I got that a lot, but those are trolls and they were never going to train with me anyway. And that's what I didn't understand. I'm not the problem. Yeah. That was their bullshit stick. Now there is nothing between me and menopause, and I'm going to go play. You can keep doing what you're doing right now quite satisfactorily with no concerns whatsoever, and it's not treading water. It's literally maintenance, and you maintain until you are ready to push. And I think this time next year, you're going to look back and realize how much you've done and be like, hey, just out of curiosity, what's the next piece of my puzzle? And I'll say, I'm so glad you asked. Because there's this new program I want to launch, and I think you would be a really good fit for it if you want to do what I think you want to do in the fall. It's called Track Attack, and I am not in a place to demonstrate it because I'm not there yet, because I got another year of pulling things back together. But if you want to do it, we're here right now. That's a long way of saying, like, no, you are primed. You are ready for your 3 to 5 year window. The question is, when are you ready to initiate that 3 to 5 year window? There's no pressure to do it sooner. You do not ever have to do it for me. You don't have to do it. There will never be pressure to perform here ever. When you decide it's time, you have all the pieces you need, because accidentally somehow you've been incredibly consistent with no big breaks. You casually pulled out 48 miles last week without thinking about it or trying, without sweating. You're sleeping through the night. Most nights. Ross still wakes up some. I get it. It's not perfect, but it's not about perfection. You have been remarkably consistent. And we're almost to that point where we've maxed out what we can get cardiovascularly. And I've been really excited to tell you this. Like, I didn't want you to feel bad. Like, I plateaued. No, that's not it. That's an exciting thing. Like, guess what? You plateaued about a month and a half ago, right around the time we started fixing what was going on with your hamstring. And I was excited to see that because it tells me all this strength is working. You're now foundationally really strong. And with that foundation being really strong, there are other things we can do to the next piece of strong. There are different ways we can go about it, but now these doors are open to you. So to make your next big breakthrough, not to say it can't happen in 10 weeks, but I'm glad the pressure's not on in 10 weeks.
Sleeping in a yurt the night before.
And I wouldn't want to do a lot of these.
I haven't. Oh, yeah. Lisa and Shara and Liz and I, we were sleeping in a yurt in New Hampshire the night before. Yeah.
took a screen. That sound was me taking a screenshot of our faces. Oh my God.
And I have been very excited to tell you that.
Oh my God.
I can't wait. It's going to be like, I'm just excited to do it again, because the last time I did it, it didn't feel like it really counted because I knew I wasn't at my best and there was so much else, so much other stuff going on. This is like, yeah, let's go see what it's like to run a marathon.
Let's sleep in a yurt with Shara and Lisa. Okay, I'm down for that. I'm down for that.
Are you kidding? We're gonna go live on Facebook.
Oh my God, I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Yes, do a whole fitness protection takeover. Do all the insanity. Yeah, I'm not trying to make any sort of prediction what's going to happen in this race, but I'm glad you're having fun with it instead of taking it like super duper seriously. Because as long as you can stay here mentally, like I've got nothing to prove, but I'd like to see what I got. That's when the good choices happen and they compound. And I think once we get a lot of the stress out of your life and you can focus on being, and I say this very tongue in cheek, but everybody needs this type of validation. You're the chosen one. Of all the people I talked to, I knew a long time ago, if this was going to happen, and make no mistake, I got big old plans, that you were the person I wanted to have with me doing it. And if you can sit in the knowledge of I'm the chosen one and the good and the bad that might bring with it, but that's the most American mindset ever from the mind of a Scottish author. Yeah. That's all the stories that we tell, right? If you can focus on that and know that like I've already been chosen, there's nothing left to prove, and stay there, amazing things can happen. And I really think they will. I don't think you're used up. I don't think you're an empty tube of toothpaste. I think it's like somebody's been pounding around you with a sledgehammer. I don't think anyone's actually been trying to use it yet. So I would close on that thought. The 3 to 5 year window doesn't really open until we've locked in at least 2 big basics, and that's cardio function through consistency and passing the chair test, which I know you can do. And then if we choose to, we can start pushing towards the next 3 items while doing hard training. You don't have to lock in all 5 simultaneously before pushing. It doesn't work that way. But now you've got options available to you whenever you want to capitalize on them. And if that doesn't excite you, you're looking at it incorrectly. I would hate for anyone to wake up in the morning and think like I'm already done. This is what I mean when I say like, you ain't started. Let's do it. And you read that by accident. I've been waiting to tell you that. When you said you wanted to have this podcast, I was like, perfect timing. I don't know how to have this conversation in a way that's convincing because everything you've got going on. And it is easy to dismiss what I say as the mindset of a super optimistic person that has something to sell. You work for me. I got nothing to sell you. And your performance will never be tied to the company's ability to sell its product. My performance should never be tied. Then we built something crappy if it has to be about like, am I the coachiest coach and the best coach you'll ever meet? No. It's about the mindset. It's about the pathway. It's about the pipeline. It's about having the support you need every step of the way to get you to where you want to go and the resources available that you would need to have another breakthrough. And we're going to build those resources in our arsenal as we go. But the difference between here and there is not accessibility to that arsenal. It's not Sarah Axelrod and the Magic Workout that's been hidden from people, the book that's yet to be written. It's about really believing in yourself and respecting the process enough to do what you've been doing since October 2017 before turning around and saying, hey, what's next? Instead of worrying about what's out of your reach and what's been missed.
I loved it when you said a few weeks ago that the space in between where you are and where you want to be should excite you. That really, I've been thinking about that ever since you said it, and it really resonated with me. And right now, I want to eat all the ice cream, as I said at the beginning. And the idea of the big push doesn't excite me yet, but I don't feel like it has to in order for you to still want to coach me. I don't feel like I have to say, yes, of course I want to do all the hardest work because that's how I'm going to get your respect, because I know that that's not how you work. And that is so freeing. I can want what I actually want.
Well, the hardest work is doing less.
And also wanting what you actually want, which is why, we always say to people, and I really feel like people are listening, even though it's hard and they don't always hear it the first time, but not what should I do, but what do I want to do? That has been a really, really awesome shift. And I love seeing the way people are processing it. And I'm so excited for everything that we're building. Thank you for all of this. I didn't intend for us to like have a big, pep talk about me, but I'm really happy right now.
I did.
I know you did.
Because because I know what's on your mind. You're about to enter, like, I know you've got a whole nother week left at Harvard, but you're about to enter a really cool freeing period that for a lot of people can be extremely disorienting. If you think about what's so hard about motherhood is being untethered from the one place where most of us tend to hang our identity. Our sense of self is on our career. All our education, all this money, all these resources have been invested in this one thing that you have now left behind for the right reasons, but are they really the right reasons? And how much of me was left behind in the process? These are grand existential questions that we don't deign answer, but we fear that we're somehow going to make our child responsible for our sense of displacement when it has nothing to do with our child and has everything to do with the forces that have led us to this moment to be the parent I want to be. I'm going to have to leave behind a piece of my identity, and that is not something anyone ever prepared me for. So before you walk off into this next step away from the place that really didn't give you back what you put into it, that your career that did not pay off, even though you earned it, I want you to remember that what you're walking into is a great big question mark of, now what can I do? And it's never from a place of, well, you didn't, And I know that you don't have that right now, but in 3 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, remember when I said, I think I'd like to hire you and you quit Harvard? And I was like, no, I never said that. But the day came when you told me you were quitting, I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. What have I done? Yeah, but like, I can't do this at the next level until I have somebody by my side. And I knew that then, and I know that now, but that's a big responsibility to take on. Like, you're walking away from, not all of the security, but some security. And that's a responsibility I take very, very seriously. To that end, I'm also aware of how disorienting it's going to be for you to get off this train, that there's so much pressure. Once it takes off, you can't get on it again. So get on the train and then decide if you want to be there, but no one prepares you for getting off of it when you're not getting on another train, right? What you're getting onto is something that may or may not work. I'm hopeful that it will. But at the same time, we're going to feel a lot of feelings, and all those feelings are valid. You're going to have a whole lot of processing. And I'm glad you're going on vacation, because all of that processing is going to be really, really valid. And when you come back, there are going to be multiple opportunities simultaneously, which for some, when there's no obvious right answer and you don't know how to find the true answer, that leads to ruin. For the person that has an idea of what they don't want to do, who they don't want to become, it's not about having the train to get on. It's knowing which ones you want to avoid. And that is more potent than anything else you could ever do. It's why even my marathon plans, it's not about here's the straight line to follow. It's about here's the shaded area to miss. And that PDF will be coming out very soon, guys. I cannot wait to show it to you. Yay! If you go right now and sign up for our weekly newsletter, Coach Notes from Coach MK and Coach Sarah, featuring things like our thoughts, a roundup of all the content that we've produced, the live streams, the really awesome podcasts, some of the blog posts, because I know we produce a lot of stuff, as well as a little section for #winning at life. And we will take and share a photo of someone in our crowd who is in fact winning at life and share it back with you with an explanation of what's going on. If you sign up for that weekly newsletter, then you can get the option to download a PDF, which shows you my nightly checklist of all the little things that I have to lock back into place, the little habits, the supporting players in my running routine that all have to lock in lockstep in order for me to make running this habit we talk about as this binary. Just do it. And it's like, no, you got to do all these other little things first. That is downloadable today as a PDF. There will be additional PDFs coming very soon. The next one will be a different way of looking at the EAT. So with that little sales bit aside, knowing that where you're going next could be really exciting, but I also get that there will be times when you feel disoriented and overwhelming. Newton's third law of motion says with every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And what he doesn't really talk about beyond that bullet point that we all had to memorize at some point for some class, that none of which we remember, it's inertia. So if you are sitting in your car and you hit the gas really hard instead of brake really hard, and you're thrown backward against your seat while your car goes forward, it's disorienting. You feel like you're going the wrong way, but you're actually going exactly where you're meant to go. The next few months are going to be exactly that, an inert state. But that doesn't mean we're going backwards. You're going exactly where you need to go.
I'm so glad that I'm going with you. As long as you're next to me, I will know that I'm in the right place.
Yay! And our husbands will make us get off eventually
if
we're losing too much money.
And we love them for that. That's
yes, somebody's got to keep it all in check. But
have a really good day. Bye.
Enjoy, everybody.